Hello, so we are going to review our first TV series on this channel, which will be Ozark Season 4, Part 1. If you're watching this, I assume you know, but if you don't, it is the final season of Ozark, and they're releasing it in two 7-part increments. And so the first part already came out on Netflix somewhat recently, like in the last month or so. And I just personally finished watching it a couple days ago and have now processed what I saw and want to share it with you guys, guy, girl, whoever's watching. So I'm going to just talk about like the highlights, both generally and for specific characters, and just go over my general thoughts of what went on. And I'm not going to give it a grade yet, as I grade everything, because the season's not over until part 2. That's when I'll be grading everything, and yeah. So I love, first and foremost, the spread out attack. If you watch Ozark, while it's really good and it's a great ensemble, there's always some great individual performances that stick out, or these moments that stick out. And while there are those in part 1, it's so much more just kind of this conglomerate of like everyone's in a state of everything's about to go wrong, even more so than usual, where it's really just every episode is like picking up the anxiety on a whole new level. And so you don't really get like, Marty hasn't had like his breakdown moment or his moment of like, oh, there's Jason Bateman doing his thing. He also hasn't directed an episode yet, which makes me excited for part 2, because his episode he directs, or episodes, are always so interesting to watch. So we haven't seen Marty's moment yet. And Wendy, while she's been very intriguing this season, hasn't really had her big moment like we saw in season 3 when she, spoilers please, has been killed. Like that was like her big moment. Ruth even, I mean, the things that girl does, she doesn't need much to kind of show you what she's got going on, which is she's the best part of the show. I don't think anybody that watches it can disagree with that. But even so, like, you know, she could even be doing more, and they're just keeping it so spread out so that the thing that shines through is really the story and the effect, how connected every story is. So they spend like little bits of time on everybody, which I've really, really enjoyed, especially because it's the last season. You're getting an even spread of everyone. Now we're going to go down specific things I've got for everybody, which Marty, again, not much to say about him so far. He's being Marty, and in this storm, he is like the calm in the storm, and it's almost constant because everything and everyone is in a state of panic and like this is the end of the world. And Marty, of course, is like more cool, calm, and collected than ever because he thrives in chaos, which I think is a sign. And I've been saying that. I've been watching with my girlfriend. I've been saying that I think that I have spoilers about that whole thing, and that they're making it specific that you see that Marty's almost calmer and you think happier in all of this mess than he would be once it's all solved. And that could have some signs of the future, but we'll see. Wendy, they are painting Wendy as the villain. Like, she has completely gone off the rails and lost it since the Ben thing happened. And you don't look at her like she's a villain because they obviously do a great job of keeping everyone very human and showing you that like everyone's going through it. And with her, you can just kind of imagine putting a hit out on your own sibling. That's insane. And they do also put a lot of weight this season into sibling and familial relationships. Did I just say familial again? That's not a word. I don't know if I made this word up recently. They have Ruth with Wyatt in 3, which 3 is barely in this season so far, but Ruth with Wyatt, which, oh wow. And then even Jonah and Charlotte's relationship, they really dig into that. And so you kind of almost get this not foreshadowing, but almost like a gloomy shadow over what happened with Wendy and Ben. Also, they're doing the whole search for Ben. But Wendy, yeah, they've really leaned into what she was already heading towards, which is like she was snapping, and she has snapped fully now, and there's almost like she's ready to send her own kid to jail just for turning his back on her and like being a teenager. Which, going into that, Jonah is probably the most annoying part of this season because he takes the whole Ben thing, which rightfully so, he's upset about it, and he's ready to like turn his family in, to go to his family's like opposition and beat them. And he's like openly telling them that. And so while I think Wendy's wild for trying to send her kid to jail, I can't say I wouldn't have done the same thing if my kid went that buck wild either. Because that's, especially where they're at, I'm like, it's kind of like a no holds bar kind of situation. We're trying to stay alive here and you're trying to do the exact opposite to us. I'd have been like, I'm not going to send him to jail forever, and that's what they're saying is like, he wouldn't, he's 14, but it's like, I'd teach him a lesson and scare him straight for sure. But again, I love that they're giving him attention and kind of digging into Jonah because they've been setting him up for a super interesting plot line for the last few seasons, and I think they're really taking advantage of that now, which I think is great. Charlotte, again, also they're turning Charlotte into like a mini Wendy, which is the coolest part to watch because you didn't even realize like this actress was so perfectly cast to kind of be a mini Wendy. And I'm really enjoying that. I almost wish she could have the amount of screen time they're giving Jonah, which I think in part 2 they might, because they're giving her a lot more interesting things to work with and everything else. So I'm hoping we see a little bit more of Charlotte in the second half. Ruth, I mean, I said it when I was talking about everybody generally. Ruth is just a powerhouse. And she's the most, like, as soon as she gets on screen, you're immediately kind of entranced by what she's doing, even if it's like the most simple thing. She's just got so good. She's so good. There's not, I can't even say specific things because everything she does is fantastic. And her last moments in part 1 of this season, after she spoilers again, finds Wyatt dead, is, wow, yikes. It's perfect. And I love that they close it out with her. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Darlene and Wyatt. Darlene's been kind of a big part, but them bringing Wyatt in and making him a bigger part of the show was something that you should kind of see. Obviously, it's like, oh, something's going to happen because they kind of never really dug into Wyatt, and they do a lot this season without really giving you much about him. He's just there a lot, and he's seeing a lot of the things that have been going on that he's never really been there for. And I've already spoiled it. He dies at the end of part 1 because of Javi, who we'll get into that whole thing, who's kind of trying to take over the cartel from Omar Navarro. Javi goes on one of his ballistic, like, I'm just an angry boy kind of rampages, and he shows up at Darlene's house when they're walking in, sits them down on the couch, says he warned them, shoots Darlene in the chest, and then shoots Wyatt in the head. And it's, like, only kind of earth-shattering, not because you're connected to those characters. For Darlene, it's one of those, like, for me at least, it was a breath of fresh air and going, how did this take this long to happen? Like, how did somebody that was clearly more powerful than her not shoot her already? And Wyatt, the only reason it hit hard with Wyatt was just because I think in that moment you realize, like, wow, like, even though he's not a huge part, he's been here since, like, the very beginning. And that's the first, like, big beginning character to get killed off. And so there's something super final about that, and just kind of, wow, and then, like, gets shot in the head, so it's almost like you don't see him bleed out or struggle, or it's just 1 second he's there and the last second he's not. And just great storytelling that his last look is the look he's had all season, which was because he's been seeing all these crazy things happen that he hasn't seen happening before. He's almost in a constant state of shock and disbelief of what's going on around him. And Darlene gets shot first, and that's kind of how he looks. And that's the last look of his life, and that's kind of encapsulates what he thought of life. It's like, terrible things are happening around this guy, and he just did not belong here. But I think the worst part of that was that you knew what that was going to do for Ruth, and then they add insult to injury when Ruth pulls up, like, immediately after it happens, and you don't even see her reaction, or like immediate reaction to seeing them. You just see her walk in and see her kind of peel out, and then you see everything, which, again, the super creative storytelling by Ozark, and just great. Overall highlights, everything Ruth, like I said, and then just the entire show is, I can't really have a gripe with anything. Even the characters you don't like, it's purposeful, and they want you to feel that way, and everything they do just works. And that's been since the beginning. And this season, they're showing you just how good they can be, because, like, there's so much chaos. It's moving so fast, and it's also calculated. And the lowlights, honestly, just more Marty. Just because Jason Bateman's just electric on camera, and I want to see him get some kind of accolades for this last season. And so I want him to direct some episodes. I want him to really go hard with his performance in some of these episodes so that we can get some specific stuff for Jason Bateman and Marty. I mean, Wendy, I think, is on her way to at least some nominations for what she's doing. And I think Ruth, as always, is going to probably sweep all the awards. I also love that I'm calling these actors by their characters' names. But, yeah, more Marty. That's my only thing. And that's really just a personal kind of, like, I want more Marty. It's not a problem with the season. But that's Ozark, Season 4, Part 1. And yeah, that is it. We'll be back with part 2. And please watch it. If you're watching this and you have opinions, comment, like, subscribe, and until the next video, see ya.